Hello and welcome to this course on oil painting. In this course we'll be going over the basics of oil painting techniques, and that includes everything from alla prima techniques to oil glazing techniques in a series of 20 simple classes. Now for those of you who have never tried your hand at oil painting before, the first thing that we're going to do is to get an overview of everything that you're going to need in the studio to actually start painting. So let's get started here. To begin with, you're going to need canvas. And of course you can stretch your own canvas, but I recommend, highly recommend, for the beginner especially, that you go to an art or craft store and you buy some of this stuff. This is a pack of 3. They also come in larger packs, and they are canvas panels. Or similarly, and slightly more expensive, you can go with a pre-packaged, pre-primed canvas that's been stretched over stretcher bars like this. Now this is similar to what you would do yourself if you were to go out and buy your stretcher bars, put them together in the frame, then stretch over them with linen or cotton duck canvas, size it, and prime it. It's a lot more work. It's also probably going to save you some money in the long run if you do it yourself. But for the beginner, that's just adding a lot of frustration and unnecessary stuff to buy when you can simply go to a store and pick it up all pre-done for you. But be forewarned, this is not going to be anything like as high a quality, as you're going to want to paint more professional pieces on as you become more expert in the techniques. Once you have a canvas though, you're going to need some oil paint. Now there are more brands of oil color than you can shake a stick at. And if it just says oil color on whatever brand, that means that it's going to be compatible with the typical solvents that you use with oils and the mediums. There is also something called an alkyd, which is also compatible with the oils, traditional solvents, and mediums, but it dries a lot faster, which is why it's called fast drying oil color. The only difference between alkyds and traditional oil color is the binding agent used. So paint is made with a color or a pigment mixed together with a binding agent that gives it its consistency and the ability to dry without cracking and things like that. It gets pretty complicated in a hurry, but all you need to know is that these are compatible. And if you want to have a traditional oil painting approach without the long wait between drying layers, you might want to try alkyds. Alkyds are also especially good for glazes because it makes that process a lot faster. Impasto techniques, which are a lot thicker and so generally can take weeks to dry, and also for underpainting. If you want to create an underpainting in an alkyd, you'll be ready to start painting over a completely dry piece 18 to 24 hours later, which is a big improvement over the typical slow drying oil colors. So get yourself some oil colors. I would suggest starting with a selection of at least 8 colors. A red, blue, and yellow, of course, because you can mix everything from the primaries. You'll also need a lot of white, and I would recommend some earth tones like burnt siennas, burnt umbers, and that sort. Then, when you have some paints chosen, get yourself a palette. A palette is anything that you can mix the paint on. So it can be glass or wood or plastic, marble, even cardboard would work. You just don't want something too absorbent. Paper is not going to work. And then to mix the paint on the palette, you're going to need a selection of palette knives. Straight knives like this are mixing knives. See how it goes up straight from the handle? That's so you can get all of the paint off the blade and keep it clean. Then you can also get a selection of palette knives, which are for applying the paint to the canvases. And those come in all shapes and sizes. Here are 4 just to show you a basic selection. Now you don't have to paint with palette knives, but you will definitely need a mixing knife. Palette knives are used to apply the paint to the canvas just like brushes, except that with a brush you're going to apply vertically like this, dab, 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 and with the palette knife you're going to apply with the side of the knife like this. So you're going to get really different effects from painting with palette knives versus brushes. But while we're talking about brushes, you're also going to need some of those, of course. There are basically two categories of brushes: nylon brushes, which are stiff and made of hog bristle, and softer brushes, which are, as you would expect, softer, made from synthetic fibers or softer animal fur. There are fan brushes and flat brushes like this for applying even, broad strokes. Then you have filberts, which are rounded, and then there are rounds, better for making lines, and then there are short flats like this called brights, and brights hold less paint. They're good for about 2 to 3 strokes, so they're better for the dabbing method than flats. But just get a selection. You don't need one of everything, and the brushes, because they're nylon, are a lot cheaper than, say, watercolor brushes. You're also going to need something to wash your brushes out in, and I recommend something odorless, like odorless mineral spirits, because they're going to clean your brushes really well, and unlike turpentine, it's not toxic fumes that are building up in your studio. They are still going to build up over time though, which is why it's crucial that you work in a well-ventilated studio. If you don't have a good ventilation system built in overhead, then make sure you're working near a window or a door that you can open, and use a fan to circulate the air in the studio. You do not want to be sitting for hours breathing in the fumes from your oil paints and your toxic paint solvents. Then you need some kind of jar. Most oil painters that I know use 2 jars, one for the dirty mineral spirits and one for the slightly cleaner, so that you first wash out your brush in the dirty and then a second time in the clean. And that way you're not continually making all of your mineral spirits really dirty. As the clean jar becomes more dirty, you can pour it into the dirty jar and then pour yourself some fresh clean spirits. Linseed oil and liquid are the 2 mediums that I use for oil painting. Liquid is my favorite. Basically, it's an alkyd gel that makes the paint smoother, slicker, and more lustrous. It won't make the paint drip like linseed oil will, and it's really great for glazing because it will make the drying time a lot faster and increase the transparency of your colors. Linseed oil is actually made from flax, which is the binder in oil paint, and it helps to make the paint dry slowly and stay workable, which is the big benefit that oil painting has over watercolor or acrylic paints. Okay, so get yourself some liquid, get yourself some linseed oil. Alright, then other than that, the only thing you're really going to need are rags. Use ripped up old towels or t-shirts or something like that because they're soft and they're going to work really well. Paper towels and napkins also work really well. You're going to need that for drying your dirty brushes after you've cleaned them in the turpentine, as well as for using the wipeout painting method and for removing paint from the canvas. The other things that you might eventually acquire if you stick with oil painting are things that aren't strictly necessary for the beginner, such as varnish and varnish brushes, palette cups to hold your mediums and solvents in, maul stick, which is just a stick which allows you to stabilize your arm above a canvas, paint rollers, an apron or a smock, and then of course just a wider selection of things you'll already have. And with that, we're ready to get started with our first lesson.